I'm Sarah Tucker. You're Diane, no, is it Gjerstad? Am I saying that right?
Gjerstad.
Gjerstad, spelled Gjerstad.
Right, you don't pronounce the G, you pronounce the J. Gjerstad.
Gjerstad. You are a Democrat.
Right.
You are a representative of the 98th House District, which is basically Wichita.
Wichita and 2 townships in Sedgwick County.
Okay, 2 townships in Sedgwick County. And you have been a member of the House since 1985?
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a real simple first question then. How did you come to be elected a representative to the Kansas House?
So you want my story on what was happening in my life at that point?
Well, however you'd put it. I guess I'm kind of interested
Okay.
in what you'd say first, and then I'll try to get you to fill in the other pieces of the whole story.
Well, really it was, timing's everything in politics. And what happened in my life is that I was how old was I? I was 26 years old, and I was student body vice president at Wichita State. I was a non-traditional student, i.e. I had gone to junior college, worked for a couple of years, and then moved to Wichita and returned to school to get my bachelor's, and which is very common down at WSU, Wichita State University. And so I was very involved in student politics, and I was vice president. And I ran for president against the incumbent who ran for re-election, who was the first one who ever did that. And he ended up that I didn't win. I was defeated in that election, and that was in November of '83. And then the next month, so I was out of student politics. I was completely out. Then the next month, the man who held my state representative seat for 16 years retired in mid-session, Jim Holderman, and they appointed his neighbor, and the precinct committee people then meet and appoint the successor, and they appointed Ed Rogers. And I was in Dodge City at my mom and dad's, reading about all this in the newspaper, and the young kid, I'll call him, but my friend who I ran with, who's a flaming conservative Republican, was sending me these clips in the mail, these clippings out of the newspaper, and he said, "Diane, you ought to run for state representative." He had run the year before against a wonderful woman that you really ought to talk to, Ruth Lozati, in Wichita. Ruth was one of the matriarchs of the Kansas legislature. Her and Ruth Wilkin were in when they were the only 2 women. And Ruth is thinking about doing a history on the Kansas House. So
Get together with her.
You'll love Ruth Lozati. So anyway, my friend Jeff, who had run against Ruth and not done a good job, basically talked me into running for office. And so then in February, I started seriously considering running for office. And what I did is you talk to everybody. You have to touch all the bases. You talk to the Sedgwick County chairperson, and he says, well, you need to talk to Margaret Simmons, because she's sort of the godmother of Sedgwick County politics, and you need to talk to Marjorie Wright, who at that point was on the city commission. And you need to talk, and this just keeps going, and you talk to all these people, and you get a wonderful wealth of information and some real practical advice that, run, fine, but realize that you're not going to get any support because you're running against an incumbent Democrat, and you're probably not going to be able to raise any money. We'll support you, whatever that means. So, and I was married at the time. So after I figured all that out, I discussed it with my husband in about April, and in reality I decided that I was going to run at that point, and presented it to John, and I decided to run and started running. And in my district it was a primary race, because my numbers are, at that time, were probably 62% Democrat it was assumed that the person who won the Democratic primary would win the general. And we ran a shoestring budget, $1,800, which included $1,800 or $1,600, I don't even remember anymore, which included $200 for the victory party. I raised money from myself and my brothers. My dad gave me a check for $50, which for an old Norwegian was just, farmer was just like, I mean, to me that was one of the, I had finally come into fruition in my dad's eyes because he wrote me a check for $50, which for a person raised during Depression was just a phenomenal experience. Well, that's how I started running. I guess I'm sort of going into the mechanics of the campaign.
Well, I find that fascinating. Now, you won. Why'd you win?
Well, we, like I said, I wasn't afraid to ask questions. The Sedgwick County Democrat coordinator at that time, whose name's going to escape me right now, it's a woman, I can't remember her name, but Jo Andros. She remembers the first day I called her up and said, "Hi, my name's Diane Gjerstad. I am going to file to run for state representative in Ed Rogers' district. I am a Democrat. Could I talk to you?" And she said, "Yes, our resources are open to any person in the party." So she said, I came down there and she said, "Here you were, you look like a teenager. You had your hair pulled back and you had shorts on and a backpack, and you came in and you sat down and you said," she claims I said, "Hi, my name's Diane Gjerstad. I'm going to win this race. Can you help me?" And she did. She gave me all the support services that she would afford to any person running for office. And we worked real hard. We went door to door. I had a printer who was just starting business at the same time. He held his printing press together literally with baling wire. We silk screened my yard signs out in my front yard. We lived in a trailer house. It was 110 degrees that day. The ink set up in the screens as we were silk screening it. But we had to do anything we could do to save money. Absolutely anything. And my printer was great. I mean, he did it on faith and hope. And we had a lot of women involved. Because I had been at WSU and had run for SGA and was very well known on campus at that point, and had actually a really nice reputation. I had women's studies. They were calling me, "Do you need help?" "Yeah, we need to walk." And we went door to door. I went door to door personally, probably 95% of the district, which is extremely high. And then we re-walked some areas, and then we did a door hanger the day before the election on "Get out to vote for Diane." I mean, that piece was so flimsy. It was like the thinnest, cheapest paper that we could find, and had a lot of women involved in it. Just a lot of women. That was in '84. So.
Okay, so that you worked real hard. Was your opponent vulnerable? Were there some issues?
No issues. He had served one session, the 1984 session. Literally nothing controversial happened that year. He was friendly in the eyes of everybody. He received PAC money from education, school boards, diverse groups, big banks, little banks, the unions. I don't know if he got any chamber money, but he was just friendly in everybody's eyes because he was there. I received, one day I went to the Sedgwick County Central Committee met and had all the candidates get up and introduce themselves, and I said, I don't know, I'm Diane Gjerstad, and I want to get elected because I want to go up there and work for the working people. That's what I want to do. The representative for the Teamsters was there, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "I want to talk to you. You're what I want to see. You're a spark that I want to see in Topeka." So a couple weeks later, I went in to talk to him about trying to get some money, because I had received no money from no organized group. And he said, well, how much money do you need? And I said, well, I would like $750. I mean, I remember this conversation vividly. I'd like $750 because that's the max you get that time. But I will, I need $180 to pay for the postage to do a mailing to all the registered Democrats in the district. That's what I need. And he said, well, I have a check here for $200. And that paid for our one mailing that we did. That went out right before the election. And then I received the Eagle Beacon endorsement also, which in Wichita, I don't know, it doesn't hurt usually.
Why do you think you got it?
I don't remember what it said at this point. Energy, fresh face, enthusiasm, willing to work. Just a spark that my opponent didn't show. His campaign, what I do know of it, was he was very presumptuous he was going to win because he had sold insurance in the area forever. I mean, literally for 40 years, right in the heart of the district. And we do know that he was going, what door-to-door that he did do, that he would say, well, she's not a homeowner. Well, we owned a trailer, so we paid property tax just like a person in a stick-built home, as we call them in the legislature. And then he referred to me as that girl. And it got to be, it literally got to be kind of a joke, and not a joke, but it was sort of that girl, because I was running around going door to door. People liked that personal attention because the seat, for 16 years, Jim Holderman had never gone door to door. Didn't need to.
Yeah.
And people they knew my name was Diane. They didn't know how to pronounce my last name. So I was known as that girl. And even on election day, people would go in and make comments about voting for that girl.
That's interesting.
Just something different than I was so much a dichotomy from a 65-year-old retired insurance agent. And they liked that difference. They loved that difference.
That's fascinating. Can you describe the makeup of your district then? Especially as, you sort of suggested it, but if you had to sum up your district and what kind of things they want out of you and what their style is, what would you say about your district?
My district is very blue collar, extremely blue collar, and I have pockets of, I have more pockets of what I would call socially, economically deprived, challenged, whatever nice word you want to put on it, people than I have pockets of $100,000 homes. Most of my people work in manufacturing firms. The things that they're looking for, literally, they are so busy trying to make ends meet day to day that they have little time in their life left for interacting with legislators or congressmen. They feel that we're not accessible. Even though I send out newsletters, they don't understand I'm in Topeka. They think I'm in D.C. They really don't understand the difference between Dan Glickman and Diane Gjerstad as far as who's where, and they think I make $120,000 or whatever Congress is up to these days, because they're really busy with the day-to-day trials of life. Most of them, not most, some of them live paycheck to paycheck. I have a lot of rentals. Starter homes are very common in my area. And then I have the other side of it are the retirees. And obviously retirees are usually more in tune to what's going on politically. And they certainly have dramatic viewpoints. I mean, they know what they think.
Sounds like it.
Is that what
yes.
demographic?
Indeed, that's what I was looking for. And I also am just interested in what when I ask a question, you want to say, because partly it's interesting different people's reactions.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
There's no right or wrong, there truly isn't. It's just
Right.
interesting what direction you come at it from. You've obviously gotten reelected since then several times.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had any more battles? Has it gotten easier and easier? Are you getting higher and higher numbers as you're reelected?
First, let's see, 86 I was unchallenged. 88 I had a Republican challenger who did not, apparently I was told later had family problems and wasn't able to work. I guess a very sick child. I mean, seriously ill child, so he wasn't able to work. This last time was my most substantial challenge by a female.
Okay.
Who, you want to know about her?
Sure, love to.
Okay. Whose name was Connie Kaimeg, who was 40s, early 40s, who was Right to Life.
Ah, yes.
And she moved into the district to run against me. She moved in April 1 and registered to vote on April the 8th, and then filed for office soon thereafter.
She moved into the district, targeted just at you, or you were seen as the easiest district, or what?
No, I was not seen as the easiest district, no.
Okay.
She moved out of a Democrat legislators district who votes anti-choice.
Okay, and you are
I'm pro-choice.
pro-choice.
And now I didn't ask her. I don't know if they needed to move and were looking for a place to move and could pick their district, or if they just picked up and moved directly into my district. I'm not certain about that, but she did move from an anti-choice district into mine.
And might I guess then that a good part of the campaign included choice versus no?
It seems to be their new tactic, since choice pro-life issues have not been winning on the national scale, and we saw that prior to last November. We saw it with Martinez down in Florida, we saw it with Doug Wilder, and there's several other races that you can name. They don't talk about choice. What they talk about are family values, those thinly veiled phrases. They attack other things. She specifically talked about spending too much money. That's always a common thing to throw against incumbents. Revitalization of downtown Wichita, which is not a state issue. One quote was, "Why did our current representative vote for burning the flag?" That was an oddly worded comment about my voting against a resolution to send to Congress asking them to have a constitutional amendment or something like that. So they work on those type of issues, taxes. It was interesting, and I was really quite worried because I had never been challenged by somebody who was as ambitious as she was, and she went door to door. She didn't go door to door throughout the district, which was probably a mistake of hers. But she went door to door, and she had a lot of people obviously working with her. They're able to rally the forces.
But she lost.
Yeah, I got 62% of the vote.
Why do you think she lost?
Well, you can either look at it as, why did she lose or why did I win?
Okay, why did you win?
A flaw that I have that inherently doesn't make me a good politician is I'm not good at tooting my own horn. Part of being Lutheran, I think. I mean, we grew up in this
You did warn me that you
Yeah,
don't draw
just,
large conclusions, and here I am asking you to do it.
Just don't toot our own horns. And I did find that was something that I had to overcome. You have to sell people on why you're good.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came up with a theme that I believe in, that I have common sense, and well, that's not a good question.
Well, maybe it is. Tell me.
Well, we developed. I think I won because I work at what I do, and I'm extremely honest, and I believe that comes out in people, that I'm sincere, and that we can disagree on issues, but as long as I don't try and pussyfoot around it, like choice,
Mm-hmm.
parental notification, issues like that people respect your viewpoints. I think people in general in my district think that I'm doing a good job. I mean, I think they just think I'm doing a good job. I'm not in the press every week. I'm not that kind of a legislator. I never will be. But I think they feel like I'm solid.
And they stuck with you.
Right. And I'm not, well, it's hard telling if they voted for her or against me. There's a certain percentage of the vote you're always going to lose. Sure. And there's some people who will never vote for me. So I guess asking the question the other way is, why did she lose? She didn't structure her campaign in a fashion to give people a reason to vote against me.
Okay.
I think if you're a challenger, it's really difficult to have people vote for you. Although that's really what I did when I first ran in '84. But what Ed Rogers made a mistake on, people were voting for me. They weren't voting against him, I think. Maybe that's presumptuous on my part. But because he had little history and had never run before. And I think he made a mistake that thinking that people knew of him because of his business and his links. Mm-hmm. There are 18 state representatives from Wichita. And
number.
There's no sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Topeka, you still have Potwin and you still have your little clusters. We really do not have that in Wichita anymore. There aren't neighborhood grocery stores and there aren't neighborhood schools, and all of that's gone. People go to church out of the area and they do everything out of the area. So there's not so much a sense of a neighborhood.
That's interesting. Well, okay. You came to the legislature starting in 1986 when you first came here. Then. 85. Okay, 85. It's election of 84. Came here in 85. What committees did you want when you first came here, and what did you get? Did you get what you wanted?
Boy, I don't remember at all what I selected or what I requested. I do remember I got my committees I got were pretty good. They put me on labor and industry because I came from a very blue-collar district, and I enjoyed that committee a great deal. Federal and state affairs, which is a pretty good appointment for a freshman, and I came in a small class, which made it even a better appointment. Okay, I think. And insurance, which is sort of a mixed bag.
Well, let me back up and come at it a little different way. Did you have a game plan when you came here? How did you think you were going to get things done? How much did you think you could get done? How did you go about beginning to be effective?
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Okay. I mean, I literally had no idea. I ran because I didn't know any better, to be real frank about it. That's what Mel Kahn, who's a poli-sci professor down in Wichita, observed, that I ran in spite of it. Because I didn't come up through the party machine. I had never, in fact, to be real frank about it, I registered as a Democrat the day I filed for office. I was unaffiliated, like many of us are. So I didn't come up here with an agenda. I really, and to this day, although my agenda probably now is economic development, I never have been the person with a specific agenda. I'm much
Okay.
more of a generalist.
How do you see your job? What job are you supposed to be doing here? When you're a success, what are you achieving? I keep asking you these general questions.
Achieving
Well, I guess I think of two categories here. I think, first of all, of laws passed, things achieved, and I also think of constituent services, and I may be leaving something out.
Well, I guess I think in terms of what are we achieving, we're achieving the development of a sound public policy which is fair and equal, which
Okay.
which weighs the rights of the minority, the needs and desires of the minority with the needs and desires of the rest of the state, and tries to develop policies which help people.
Okay.
Help people live better lives, whatever better may be. I mean, it might be better schools, it might be better roads, it might be better perception of public safety, social programs which help those who are disenfranchised or those who can least help themselves lead a more humanitarian life. And I'm sure a slew of other things, and trying to weigh those and balance those together under the constraints of a budget.
Mm-hmm. How do you fight for that? How do you get things done for your constituents, for your vision of Kansas here in the legislature? And, okay, let me give you again some of the categories you might move in then. Did you find a mentor? Is there a group of people you're able to work with? Are there certain committees you've gotten on because you think that's most important?
Okay.
Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to stay here forever? There's a million ways you could talk, I think.
Well, I've targeted my interests around economic development,
Okay.
and whatever that means. It's a very comprehensive area. And I've spent my time trying to work in development of policies and programs that will help the base economy of Kansas. There's a couple ways to look at this job. And the way I would really like to be of service is to help in the creation of wealth, not just shifting wealth away from the haves to the have-nots through taxation policies and through programs that, quote, giveaway programs. But in essence, I really firmly am convinced that for Kansas to be a viable entity in the year 2000, and for our next generation to have a legacy, that we must build a foundation right now that creates wealth within this state. And I think the alternative is that we will just be another state in the prairie, and that we won't have enough money to do the things that we want to do, to have the universities, to have the social programs, to have the educational system. And I really am, again, firmly convinced that the window of opportunity is right here now, and that it's starting to close. With the seeds that we plant today, the generation that we're trying to educate today to be productive workers in a narrowing workforce base that will need to sustain a much broader group of retired people, i.e. the baby boomers who are moving into retirement. And that's just a real critical linkage.
Just a second, let me turn this over. Okay, we're going again. You have this vision then of an economic development, a closing window of opportunity. How do you hope to get this accomplished? What critical issues do you see?
Well, that's an excellent question, one that I'm not certain that any of us have figured out the entire answer of it because it's so comprehensive. I mean, it's literally begins with prenatal services and preschool, well, prenatal parenting classes. We've assumed that people know how to be parents. That's not. I think we've finally figured out that's not an assumption anymore. Helping people, giving people the tools to be parents and good parents. Preschool education, especially preschool, to help those kids who come from a background that they just need a little more help. They need some catching up. It might be that they're physically challenged or mentally challenged or economically challenged. And then obviously K through 12. And K through 12 I just think is, I think there are some bright spots, and I think there are some real dismal realities that there are 25% of our kids that we're not educating. And then you can get into higher ed, which is not my forte, but the area that a lot of us are trying to concentrate on is the vocational educational arena, which means the area of tech schools, the AVTSs, and the community colleges. I think that they are a real crucial part of the job training picture. Because even though I see this lifelong continuum, the fact of the matter is the demographics are, and this is kind of scary, 75% of our workforce in the year 2000 has already graduated from high school. 75% has already graduated from high school. So that means two things, I think. I think for that other 25% that haven't graduated yet, that I would assume that means they need to have higher productivity. For those who have graduated, we need to develop a much, much better system of training and retraining, and also adult basic skills. And we're going to have to be real brave, and we're going to have to jump in this whole arena of unemployed people. And let's see, what are the nice catchphrases from that? I mean, we have those who are marginally unemployed, and that's the ones we always cream off the top and prop them up and give them 16 weeks of training and send them back out the door. Those who are, I don't remember how the distinctions are made, but the people who have just need new training and have more substantial problems. It might be that they have kids at home and don't have a way to take care of them, that if they go into a job training program, they'll lose their medical card. I mean, those harsh realities, they don't have transportation, that whole array. And then there are the chronically unemployed. I don't know if we need to work on those top two layers before we get into that. I mean, and boost them up. All so that we can be a productive state.
How do you hope to work toward that here in the legislature? By what committees? By what groups of people can you cut deals? Seems perhaps the wrong way to put it. Find a meeting of the minds.
You're right. I mean, it's sort of cutting deals. Well, now that we're in the majority, I'm the chair of the House Economic Development Committee, and I've also been named chair of the Joint Committee on Economic Development, which we are a statutory committee, and we will meet this summer. And this past summer, we dealt with workforce training, and I haven't figured out our agenda yet, but I'm sure that I will do something similar. So I started floating this whole thing of human capital back in 1988, back when human capital was just sort of this way out in space type of thing. I mean, what is it? It's very difficult to find. So that's what I'm hoping to work for. What we need to do, and it's a lot of it's based around education. We need to broaden who looks at the educational issues in legislature. Right now, obviously, it's the Education Committee.
Mhm.
And if it's higher ed, then it goes to LEPC. I think that we, as from our focus of economic development, and from our focus of looking at the workforce training
Mhm.
study that was done last year by Chuck Kreider for Kansas Inc., we have a different perspective, and we bring different things to the table. And the school boards and the teachers associations haven't looked at it from our perspective.
Mhm.
And so we have a whole new area of groups and affiliations that we need to express to them our concerns. Just had lunch today with a group from Wichita affiliated with the Chamber, and I brought up workforce training and junior colleges and the AVTSs and how key they were, and one of the proposals we have is to develop a third governance board. And I talk their language, and they talk my language, and we think, I mean, of course we think what we say is great, but I mean, we understand that there is a drastic problem with skilled workers,
Mhm.
or people who have just basic skills of being able to communicate, decision-making skills. I mean, I'm not talking about being able to put something on a lathe and turn out a tool. I'm talking about being able to work in groups on decision-making, on projects, analytical skills, and of course, math, computation, and reading skills. Those are the basic skills we're talking about, not how to bend sheet metal.
Mhm.
We talk the same language, but if I talk to a representative of the State Board of Education and ask them if they've been talking about workforce training, and if they've been talking about vocational training, and if they've looked at the Joint Committee's efforts, the answer is no.
Hmm.
And so there's a big gap in there right now.
So you're trying to make connections. You're trying to get more people to see that the issue you're talking about is
broader.
broader.
It's much, much broader. And it's great for Democrats. It's a wonderful Democrat issue.
Mm-hmm.
And to be real frank about it, I haven't figured out how to do this on yet.
Well, I will look forward to how you do. I think it's a real important issue. You've been in the legislature for a while now. How do you see women doing in the legislature? And that question can be handled many different ways.
I think we're very fortunate in Kansas. Kansas women have a history of pioneering. First female sheriff. Suffrage was second state in the Union. Well, depending on how you look at it. Okay. Early. Okay.
We sure turned down the national vote, but did better in school boards and things like that.
Yeah. We've had a good history of women being involved. And I honestly, coming from a rural community, and since I used to sell fertilizer in my former life and worked with farmers, I find that farmers, for the most part, are very inclusive of women. Much more so than the suits businessmen. So I think because we are a rural state, I think farmers are more apt to vote for a woman that they feel is qualified than the average businessman. I really feel it. I don't have any empirical data to support that. I just think that farmers, given that the way on a farm everyone works, and that's not the way it is in town. So women have been elected to the legislature from rural areas in Kansas and urban areas in Kansas, on both sides of the aisle. And the fights that a Ruth Wilkin and a Ruth Lozati were fought prior to my getting here. Another unique thing I think in Kansas is that, or somewhat unique, is that our staff people are so good, and they're nonpartisan. Some legislatures have partisan staffs. I would imagine there's a lot of turnover. our research people and budget analysts, more so our research and our revisor's office, they have a large number of women working there. So these women, male legislators had to rely on females giving them expertise prior to there being a large infusion of women in the legislature, or while this is all going on. I mean, you're not only getting your expertise from women, but the person sitting by you in committees of women. Our economic development committee is almost half 50-50 on women and men. I mean, women are very, very involved. So for a large part of the fights have been fought. So the overt discrimination, I think, is in large part with the exception of a few good old boys and a few legislators who pat women on the rear and do the junk like that, who we all know who they are. The overt things are gone, but there is certainly a covert sexism and racism that goes on in any of these structures, and I think that's sort of the ism of the 90s, is that it doesn't slap us in the face, and I'm afraid, and I know I'm guilty of it. So you become lulled into this thinking that I'm an equal, and they're looking at me equal. But when you know, in the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, his viewpoint of women is not that they're equals, but as that there's something to be played with. Yeah, and that's one of the more powerful committees. You just have to think how that filters on the way down through the system, how the money's spent. Yeah, you fund what you fear. But
we're beginning to see women move into higher leadership positions. One, why do you think that is? Two, how much difference do you think it's going to make? And three, how fast do you think there's going to keep on being change?
It makes a difference because a woman has a different viewpoint. It certainly makes a difference, substantial difference. And I think we as women need to be more cognizant of that difference and cultivate that difference, because that's good for the system. That is good for public policy making. You have better public policy if you have a wider divergence of opinions and attitudes going into that decision making. Women are, well, just the reason is we just have higher numbers. That's why we have more women in leadership. Okay. And I know Marvin had people lean on him. We wanted females put on the Appropriations Committee. For the last 2 years, there have been no Democratic females on the Appropriations Committee. We didn't like that. And I know, I wanted on the committee, but and now we have 2 or 3.
So why did you get it this year and you didn't get it 2 years ago?
Well, part of it was numbers game. 2 years ago, there was only 1 slot open. This year, we had the majority, and we ended up filling, I want to say 5 slots. That may be too many.
A lot more.
Because there was more opportunity, then certainly that gave the speaker more latitude.
Okay.
We've had some dynamite. We have dynamite women involved.
And they are, of course, 2 years more senior, some of them, than they were 2 years ago.
Sure. I mean, the Donna Whitemans, the Kathleen Sebeliuses, and the Joan Wagnans have proven their muster. I mean,
And
I like to say they have ovaries. They say the boys have balls. Well, these women have ovaries.
I love it. What do you think is the difference in, I'm not going to call it the female point of view, but you suggested that some women bring a slightly different perspective. Could you define what you think that is?
I'm trying to. I'm not going to do that question justice, but I'll give it a shot. Obviously, just from our how we are socialized, and still, even with my generation, that our role is predominantly as caregivers, whether it's nurturing children or elderly parents, or taking care of certain responsibilities in the home. We haven't shaken those roles. Because of that, I think we're in tune to different, we look at things just from a different viewpoint than a male counterpart would. Right now we're having hearings on the family leave bill. I can't think of anything that has made me feel good for being here in a lot of years as having hearings on that bill. And the flippant comments that I'm hearing from, I'm going to go ahead and stereotype male business owners who think that two weeks maternity leave is fine, and after all, they build up 8 hours sick leave a year, and we let them take, we're flexible, we let them take 4 hours one day and 4 hours another day, is adequate. And how dare the state of Kansas mandate that they allow up to 10 weeks of unpaid leave? I mean, how dare you? We know the needs of our people. But I can look at that man and I can think, he doesn't have a clue what goes into taking care of, like my father spent 6 months in a hospital. He just doesn't have a clue. So I just think that we just look at things from a different issue.
No, thank you very much. I could go on forever in how the legislature works and what you're doing here and all that. Could you give me a few examples of bills you fought for, maybe sponsored, maybe not, issues you fought here of which you are most proud, or even you lost big and still rankle? What have been some of the high spots?
Okay. I think the bill that I'm real proud of that I voted against was the lottery, putting the lottery on the ballot for the people to vote on. From many perspectives, I was, I think it was my second year in the legislature, so I was a freshman. And John Carlin was governor, so it was my governor. And there were very precious few of us in the House. There were only 49 Democrats. I mean, we can do anything we want to do, but the governor wanted this issue. And I knew it was coming up, and I'd done some research on it. And just briefly, my opposition was steeped in the fact that it was a state-owned and operated lottery. And it is my opinion that it is not the purpose nor the place of the state of Kansas to induce people to spend their limited disposable income on hype and hallucination. And that's all a lottery is, in my opinion. It's just a dream, a pipe dream. And I don't think that's a role of state government. So anyway, that bill was interesting because I was on everybody's list to target. I mean, the lobbyists are running around and they're trying to gin up votes because it became linked with pari-mutuel. The Senate said, we want lottery, and if you don't give us lottery, we ain't giving you pari-mutuel back. And the Speaker, Mike Hayden at that time, needed to run for governor. So he needed to be seen as being liberal on some sin issue because he was anti-liquor by the drink. And the governor wanted it. So I was on the short list. The reason by the short list, I mean the Speaker's people were lobbying me, the governor's people were lobbying me, and here I am. I mean, I'm 28 years old. I mean, I'm just still pretty much bug-eyed about the place. But I'm proud of myself on that issue because I think I took a very sound philosophical position about state government. I don't think we do that very often. I think we're very reactionary, and very seldom do we sit down and think, what does this mean, either to the big picture or to common good? I mean, I'm very proud of that. Secondly, I didn't back down. I wasn't obstinate about it, but I was just firm in my conviction. And when the governor did call me in and I explained it to him, he just said, okay. That was, Mike Hayden had people lobbying me, so, and then we had calls to the house, and they'd lock all the doors, and they'd lock you in there, and they'd be hovering around 80, they needed 83 votes. They'd be hovering around 81 votes, and my phone would start to ring. And I mean, that's how you put the pressure on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, and it was so intense. And it was such a great experience because it included all of the things that happen in the legislative arena. I mean, really tight. That's the only vote that I was really a focal point, and people coming after me. And in fact, one day, a representative, a Democrat, walked into my office and said to me and another person who officed with me who was also voting against it for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
He came in and looked at us and said, you know, Leroy Fry is going to vote for the lottery to help the governor get it passed, and he'll probably get beat. And you two are sitting in districts that support the lottery, and you ought to be voting for it. And just turned around and walked out. I mean, even that kind of
So you really saw the world on that one.
I really did, and I held tough, and I held myself honorably, and I'm very proud of myself to this day for that vote.
Did you have any trouble in your district?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about one you won.
Oh, okay. One on, well, Ken Grotewheel and I, Hayden was still speaker, so whatever year that was, developed a small business loan program, and it's never been funded, unfortunately, but we put our names on it. And this is sort of a, maybe I won it. We put our names on it, we got it all, I was told at the very beginning, because it had 2 Democrats on it, it wouldn't pass. But I have a good reputation on the Republican side. I'm well liked on the Republican side. I'm not seen as a partisan Democrat. I'm seen as a Democrat, but I'm not one that takes shots at them, and I'm looked at a person who is reasonable.
Okay.
And I said, no, we can pass this bill with my name on it. I know we can, and we did. And it was the first bill Ken had ever gotten that far. And he didn't know, well, what do we do next? Well, we're going to do this, and by the way, I'm starting to grease it in the Senate, and went all the way through. And unfortunately, the Senate amended another bill into it, and then they vetoed it because of that other bill.
Oh,
and
dear.
So then we had to run it through the next year. At that point, we didn't put our names on it. We didn't have to, because everybody knew it was my bill. Unfortunately, it's never been funded, so but that was a small business loan program. And then this past year, we worked really hard on developing something for rural Kansas. It's called Rural Strategic Planning. And developing a grant program. And I'm very proud of the work I did on it, because I think I took a mediocre plan and made it much, much better.
Okay. Why did you decide to register as a Democrat? You sound middle of the road. Why are you a Democrat?
Oh, I'm definitely a Democrat.
Why?
Why? My heart and soul lies with the working people, with the farmers, with working class, and I have empathy for areas of social need, and that's just how I grew up. There's no. It's just literally how I evolved, and that's the atmosphere I grew up in.
So even though you weren't always registered as a Democrat, you always were one. Why weren't you always registered as one?
I don't know, to be real frank about it. It's before I got involved politically, I thought I had voted in the previous primary, but evidently I had not. Which is just a common common lack of awareness. That's what a lot of us do.
Okay. Well, let me go back to your private life then and ask you about this Norwegian family that you grew up with. Your father's Norwegian. Is he first, second, third, fourth generation Norwegian?
First generation American. So his parents both came
American,
from Norway. They met on the boat.
Good heavens. About when would they have gotten here?
Grandpa came in '04 and then went back home for a couple years. I think he came back, I want to say in '06, might be '08, right in there.
Okay. Before World War I, in other words. And they came out to Kansas and started to farm?
Oh no, I'm from Iowa. I'm a carpetbagger.
Well, you're a carpetbagger.
I'm literally a carpetbagger. I moved to Kansas in '79 and was elected in '84.
Okay.
They moved to Iowa and worked as hired hands. Basically, it was a form of white slavery, to be real frank
Good
about
heavens.
it. Oh yeah, the newcomers, and that's how they spoke of the people coming over on the boats, were worked on the farms very hard and got room and board, stayed in the barns. It was...
Where in Iowa was this?
Oh, all over.
All over.
Oh, all over, yeah. Norway lost a greater percentage of its population than Ireland did during the Great Potato Famine. And Norway is just a very poor, downtrodden country. I mean, how many great Norwegians do we know? I mean, Mondale is the only one that anybody knows.
Your father ended up with a regular place to live. Eventually, he was able to pull himself out of this background. Or?
Dad's grandparents came over from Norway, and then they met and married and rented farms, and they were farmers. And then Dad was the oldest, and was a boy on top of it. So it was real interesting. My grandmother was very matriarchal. I mean, she ran that family, and she had, I can't remember how many daughters, about 6 daughters and 3 sons. The daughters all went to college. The sons, Dad had a 10th grade education. I think the other 2 graduated from high school. Yeah, just the inverse. Grandma sent the girls to college, and the boys worked on the farm just to support all that.
Good heavens.
And Dad was very, very bright. With 10th grade education, you'd never known it. But she really kept the thumb on. And the rationale, according to my mother, was so that the girls would marry well. And most of them did. They married very well. They married farmers.
Your father ended up living where?
With his parents until he was promised that if he would stay home and take care of the farm for X number of years, I don't remember how long it was, that they would buy him a new car. Well, now.
Okay, you have this father who's promised that if he works X number of years, he gets a car.
I think it was a car. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure it was a car. And so what ended up happening is Dad stayed, obviously, because grandmother really, how do I put this? My dad he's deceased now, he's a really kind person, but literally had little or no spirit by the time he got through this. No decision-making ability on his own. Very repressed. That's the word I would use, repressed household. And so then he and Mom got married. I don't know how old he was when they got married. Not real old. I mean, probably mid-20s or something like that. And then, there was no car. He got a few chickens and a couple of cows. And his brother, my Uncle Earl, claims that, and it's probably true, Earl was also working on the farm, that he had to talk the parents into giving Dad the milk cow.
So your mother was this someone your father had known for a long time?
In a nice way, it was an arranged marriage. My mom wanted to go to college, and her mother, who was also a very strong woman, would not allow it. And Mom was only allowed to see Dad. And Mom did graduate. Mom's 2 years younger, and she did graduate from the same high school. So the families sort of knew each other. And it was sort of a done deal.
So they got married. Now, your dad leaves his parents' farm then at that point?
And then they rent their own farm.
They rent their own farm.
A few miles away, yeah.
My goodness. So, aside from the role models of your grandmothers, which is pretty unusual, or maybe not, what kind of a family did they form? I mean, what was your image of women's roles and men's roles and families and all of that?
Well, then in my family, there are 3 older brothers who are substantially, I mean, my oldest brother is 16 years older than I am, and then 14, and then like 12 years older than I am. So I am literally another family. I have little memory of when the boys were still at home. My mother was bound and determined that I would have what she did not have. And that I would have, above all else, the ability to take care of myself if I got into a bad marriage or something happened and I was on my own. So it was really important to her that I go to college. And all the boys went to college. My brothers are all very well educated, and one has a PhD, one has, I don't know how many master's degrees my one brother has, and a specialist degree, all sorts of things. And then the other one only has a bachelor's, but is very successful in business. So it's a very well-educated family. In fact, I have about the least education of anybody. But then my dad always, he never promoted it. Mom did it in a very subtle way. I mean, it was never said, you shall go to college. But when we all graduated from high school, we all went to college. It was, I talked to my one brother about it one time. It was just it was very subtle. I mean, she was excellent at it. Really was. I mean, she just.
Do you ever talk, your mother is still living?
Oh yeah, we're best friends.
Do you ever talk to her about all this? I mean, as she sees women's roles change and life roles, what does she say about all this?
She doesn't. I think she thinks it's. She thinks what I do is just wonderful. I mean, she just thinks it's a delight. You know, she had me when she was 40 years of age. She said, you know, it's pretty old to have a child, and then I get you. I mean, you're doing this. She's always worried about it. But I think if she is embittered at all, it's at the fact that she did it alone without support from Dad. I mean, even when my older brother got a divorce, Dad said, well, if he would have stayed home and been Dick Dumphy's hired man, this would have never happened, which is just, so.
But I can also see why that $50 from your dad meant so much to you.
Oh, yeah.
That was really.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Now, you did mention that at one point you were married. I take it.
Yeah. Oh.
We have gone pretty long.
I just have a meeting with a bunch of people I've lined up. So.
Which is real important. Let's at least get a little more. What impact did being a politician, being in the legislature, have on your marriage? Was that part of the problem?
No, I really do not think so. In fact, John and I were married for 6.5 years before we divorced, and it was not a bitter divorce at all. It's just, and I think being in the legislature actually lengthened the time that we were married. After about 2 years, it was crumbling quickly, and I think John was very proud of me. When I first started running, that first campaign in 83, 84, during the primary, nobody knew my family, nobody understood what I was doing, and nobody believed in it, and John was the same way. But then when John realized I was going to win, he became supportive he became my coach, my trainer. You got to go walk. it's 5 o'clock, got to go walk.
Uh-huh.
Put up yard signs and was very supportive in that. So I don't think being part of the legislature, being any legislator made an impact. I really don't.
Okay. How do you support yourself, to be really nosy? It's very difficult to...
It is difficult, and I haven't found the balance, to be real frank about it. I've had some jobs outside the legislature that were basically ended up being temporary, and that is something I've got to balance very quickly. Most people have a life and a career, and then they have a balance, and then they
Yes.
make a decision on whether or not the legislature will fit. A few of us invert that process, and it doesn't work very well unless you have a shingle that you can hang up, like you're a lawyer or you're an accountant or something like that. I don't have a shingle, so that makes it more difficult for me.
What do you do in the off time?
Right now, I'm not employed outside the legislature.
Okay. I presume you moved down here during the legislative session?
We sublease a house here in town, and I go home on weekends.
Okay. How hard is that on your personal life?
It's real hard on friends, I think, because I end up, when I go home on weekends, I spend a certain amount of time with my mail, and it's just real hard to keep touch with your friends. I end up feeling pretty guilty about it in about March because I haven't been a good friend.
Okay. Might I ask you, do you have a significant other?
Yeah, I have a guy I'm dating right now,
Okay.
yes.
And this doesn't make any more difficulty with that than any other traveling
No, in
job?
fact, it helps because since I haven't, to be real frank about it, since I haven't found gainful employment outside the legislature, it helps my self-esteem and my self-worth to be up here doing work.
That's interesting.
I'm a better person. More livable.
How has being in the legislature changed you? What has it given you? What has it cost you, and what has it given you?
Well, I think this is going to sound a little bit trite. I don't want to sound trite. I think people have endowed me with this terrific opportunity, and to be their voice and their eyes and ears up here, and I think that's just a wonderful mission to have, an agenda item, and people having confidence in me. I take that very personally because I just think that is just so neat that they think that I had the ability to either make good decisions or rational decisions, whatever it may be. And I've learned a lot, and there's so much more out there. I mean, you just keep. That's why you run again, because there's just so much there, and there's so much more new ground to plow every year, and there's new areas that you want to expand into, and you develop a greater insight the longer you're here. I don't look at things as superficially, I hope, as I did 6 years ago, because I know that there's a quid pro quo on most of this stuff, and there's a domino effect, and that the problem that we're having across the street in the Department of Corrections with overcrowding relates to my file here on domestic violence, and trying to bring that issue to the forefront in a quiet sort of fashion. I don't remember the rest of your question.
Well, what does it cost you? What's the downside?
The downside is that I have literally kind of given up my employment for 5 years or so. If I would have graduated from college and gotten a real job, I have given up everything that would have come with 5 years of constant employment, steady employment.
How do you make ends meet to really pry into your life
Well,
here?
like I said, I've worked some a few years ago, so I made pretty good money, and I'm very frugal, but I'm at a point now where I'm diminishing returns very quickly. And I've had good luck, and I've had a few other things, but now my car died this weekend, so I mean, this may be getting ugly fast.
What are you going to do?
Look for a job.
Okay. So you really are committed to this, to being a legislator?
I'm committed for 2 more years, and then I
2
have to examine. I mean, I'm the only person who's going to look out for Diane.
Uh-huh.
I don't have a husband. I don't expect to get a husband. I look out for me. My mom is 73. I mean, that adds a whole new twist of caretaking, and that's kind of back there in the back of my mind. And I've got to start making some economic decisions for Diane.
Okay. Has it changed how people look at you, this being a legislator?
Well, not my friends.
Okay. Is there, and I know you've got to leave, is there a big question, or is there something I should have asked you, or something you want to say to get on the record?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Well, then I'm going to thank you very much and not go any further.